Okay, we appear to be live. Audio seems to be good so far. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Been this is my like first real respite this week. Um, with maybe second. I don't know. Aside from doing your show on your channel, yeah, this is the next point of like entertainment and rest that I get to myself, which
Well,
I'm
I'm always
happy.
appreciative when you're on Quantum Leap Revisited. I know how busy you've been, and you still somehow find a way to make an appearance there. So always really like that.
Well, I mean, I like hanging out with you. I love the Quantum Leap show. I like the rest of the panel that you got over there. Those are great guys to talk with. So yeah, it's that's why it's fun, and that's why I work as much as I can to get there. Not to say
It's a
the other,
positive. It's
yeah,
a positive atmosphere. Probably the most positivity we see, aside from your streams here on Scripts on Saturdays. Maybe that Quantum Leap one is very positive.
there is. I mean, the only reason I haven't been able to do the earlier shows is that my job has been very demanding of me the last couple of weeks. So I'm like, I kind of
I
really
understand.
want to. I'm like, I mean, I get to make my own schedule, but sometimes you have to make that in accordance with certain tasks, and then it's like, well, if that's the only time that task can get done, well, son of a gun, I gotta do it. But I'm happy to be here this week. We got a great script to talk about in the sense that it shares some things from last week's show, which was a very much of a thriller take on the same concept. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into the actual show start here. Okay, welcome to Scripts on Saturdays, the only screenplay review show on the interwebs discussing scripts both professional and amateur, circulating around Hollywood, giving you, the TV and movie-going audience, a behind-the-scenes and inside track on what writers are pushing and what producers are buying. I am your host, the Script Doctor, and joining me this week is Price O Reason, Price of Reason,
No,
Twitter handle,
actually,
and
on Twitter, it is Price O Reason
yep,
because some jerk got Price of Reason.
that's right. So yes, your Twitter handle and your name, Price O Reason and Price of Reason, is here with me this week, back again. Um, I'm happy to have you here for this one because this is the type of script that requires the type of eye that you have for things um, beyond just the general taste. Because the taste is important, but there's also it's one of the things that we've been revealing to people listening to the show is that even a script that is to our taste or not to our taste might have something else to it that could make it enjoyable to a general audience, and
For sure.
I think there's some value in that, and you are definitely a good candidate to to help assess that for those out there listening.
Well, I've always understood that your show, it's mainly that you're evaluating these screenplays that were considered or greenlit by big studios. So the idea here isn't necessarily what do I like or what do I enjoy watching in my spare time. It's more of, can this script work? Is it something that somebody could sell? Is it something that would you know attract viewers? That's really, I think, what's important, especially on this show, is to try to understand if there's demand for this type of script.
Right, and so let's get into it with this week's script called "It's Not You, It's Me." It came in 77th on last year's blacklist with 9 votes. It's written by Shane Kennedy and Ant Simpson. That's A-N-T, not A-U-N-T.
Okay,
And yeah, Price, please share with us the log line for "It's Not You, It's Me."
right away. Hold on. Have to just pull it up, and then the log line. That's me, right? The log
That's you,
line.
sir. Yes.
Couples breakup spirals into chaos when a magical Hawaiian waterfall swaps their bodies, forcing them to confront their fractured love and fix a wedding or risk losing everything that matters.
The synopsis for It's Not You, It's Me, It's Me. When Nick and Sophie break up just days before the lavish destination wedding of his best friend and her sister, they vow to keep it a secret until after their nuptials. But what should be a simple white lie becomes a living nightmare when a mystical encounter turns them into the one thing they hate most in the world, each other. So, we've got another body swap, romantic script. However, this one is a comedy. And on top of that, its logline and synopsis are actually in line with the execution of the script, whereas last week's episode, it was not the case. Last week's was about the couple goes on a retreat to spice up their marriage. There's no retreat, and their marriage was spiced up, but I don't know if it was exactly what they were, what the writer was going through with that idea versus what they did. For this week's script, though, I would say the log lines and the synopsis are actually more on point with what goes on with the story itself, and I think it's I think it swings for the fences in the realm of comedy and trying to be a pleasant experience for the audience. What were your initial thoughts?
My initial thoughts were that a lot of times when you have this kind of rom-com, even though here it's like rom-com with a mystical twist, but a lot of times when you have these kind of rom-com movies, there's a lot of kind of nonsensical things that happen in them. Mm-hmm. They just sort of have to have a certain atmosphere and work a few angles. And if they do that pretty much okay, then I think that they speak to the audience that they're trying to attract. And in that sense, when I was reading this screenplay, I thought that at least in different beats of it, it seemed to be getting right what I think a lot of people, especially women, like about these type of movies.
Mm-hmm. No, I noticed that as well. There was, it definitely leans lots on the emotions for a romantic comedy and what you're trying to hit and why you're trying to hit it, and couch all of that into a compelling story. One of the things that I found kind of fascinating is that there's a huge sports theme running underneath this story. So right. It's not like the typical type of chick flick in its overall superficial nature. It's about Nick, who is a sports writer. He covers the Chicago Cubs. He interviews the team manager after every game, so he's got a friendly relationship with him. And Nick's girlfriend Sophie is a food critic in Chicago, so she does it through like her blogs, her TikTok, and what have you. And I guess she works for a local publication, but I'm not. They keep that part a little out of reach, those specifics. But yeah, they're together. They're both essentially writers. So we do have a trope where you have writers writing about writers, which is not always a great sign for it. But one of the things I think that goes to the screenplay's credit and to the writer's credit is that they don't dwell on the actual art and struggle of writing. They actually are focusing on something that's more immediate with regards to the lives of Nick and Sophie and what they're going through, right?
Totally. And I also want to say that as you were talking, something else, because you mentioned the part about the baseball, something else occurred to me. A lot of times, how sometimes you have, there's like a children's movie mm-hmm. that you're going to take some kid to or whatever it is, but they also make it so that the adult maybe doesn't suffer so much while watching it as well. So I feel like this movie, even more than the little kid situation, I think that this movie may be a rom-com, which usually really the first and foremost audience it's trying to grab is the ladies, but they also want the ladies to bring their dates, and they also want the dates not to suffer. And this thing with having him do more sports and having it a little, giving a little more of the angle of the guy, I think that they made it a little more balanced in hopes that the guys that would go to this rom-com with their girlfriend would go more kind of willingly and with a better, more positive attitude. If that makes sense.
Well, I think so. I mean, it's like Fever Pitch, the Drew Barrymore
Jimmy Fallon.
Jimmy Fallon. I forgot his name because that's how impactful he is. Jimmy Fallon comedy. That's about
Is it
baseball.
Jimmy Fallon? Wasn't she with Justin Long in a comedy? But I can't remember. Am I now? Wait, Justin Long was something about a distant relationship. What's it called? Like a
Long distance relationship.
yes, that was a long distance. Wasn't I feel like there were two movies that were very similar that came out around the same time with Drew Barrymore. One was with Jimmy Fallon and one was with Justin Long, but I could be completely wrong on this.
Yeah, I can't remember. I know Fever Pitch was Fallon and Barrymore.
Yes, that's
Um,
what I thought. But what was the one that was around the same time? Am I imagining that there was one with Justin Long and now I have to check this out. Uh,
uh, yeah, I can't remember. I think they were going the distance. Maybe was that it? No,
Going
no,
the
no,
distance. Yes, no, I think
no.
uh
Oh wait, yeah, you're right. Yeah, it is going the distance.
and going the distance was because they were distant from each other, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
See, I know you think I'm crazy, but I knew there were two
No,
of them.
because that also had Christina Applegate in it, right? If I'm not mistaken.
It's possible. Let
I
me
think
look for
so.
a
Because
second.
she's like the friend.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. She's the friend.
Right.
I actually
And then
like
on top of
Christina
that,
Applegate more than her. Yeah, go on.
well, then on top of that, you also have, another comedy where there's a body swap of sorts, and that's with Rob Schneider and the hot chick, right? Where she switches bodies with Rachel McAdams. Um,
Right. Yeah.
and
I
and
remember that one.
and that's basically, I mean, we're getting some of that type of comedy here. So, well, like, let's share with the audience a little bit of like the premise. So the screenplay opens up with a narrator talking about love and a meet cute, which we're then getting depicted in corresponding visuals. And it's played up as a joke because when we cut to who the narrator is, who ends up being this guy named Dale, who's the Chicago Cubs team manager, opposite him is our main character, Nick, who says, "That's all well and dandy, but I asked you a question about like your lineup. Like who's coming out of the lineup, who cares about, you know, romance and meet cute, because I have to, write about this." And this is where we get into this joke where Nick has been with the Chicago Cubs as a reporter for them for such a long time that the entire ball club knows him, knows his relationship with Sophie, views him as family, and they're all kind of keeping an eye on the progress of the relationship, wondering when they're going to seal the deal with marriage. Like, and it's really something you don't expect a bunch of ball players to even care about. But that's the joke that is being established here, is that they're more invested in, they're as invested as they are in the actual game. They're more invested in Nick and Sophie's relationship, which tells you that this is supposed to be an absurd comedy right off the bat. That's setting the tone right there. Is,
I
oh,
suppose,
okay.
yeah.
I mean, I don't think they really nailed it in that part, but I understand what they're going for there. Is they're saying, okay, so we have this guy who's a coach of the baseball team, who is a hopeless romantic, and apparently a lot of players on the team are like that as well, but they don't ever like reveal it in a way that compromises, I guess, their masculinity. Because what we find out is that Nick is also best friends with Will Cartwright, who is, I believe, a pitcher for the Chicago Cubs in this context, and he's kind of old for a pitcher. He's like 32, and they've been friends for a long time. They're so close and friends that Will is actually dating Sophie's slightly younger sister, Gabby. So you got these two best friends, and they're dating sisters. So you got that. That's how tight their camaraderie is. And everyone is kind of wondering what's going on with Nick and Sophie. Like, that seems to be the subject at hand, and both Nick and Sophie are a little perplexed by this, because they're trying to focus on the career. They're enjoying their relationship so far. And then as we kind of get all the way sped up to like the first game of the season, I think, Will goes out onto like the training mound. He's throwing a few pitches, and then all of a sudden he slips and looks like he twists his ankle and he falls down, and everybody starts swarming around him. And Nick's like, oh gosh, this is going to be a story, and it's not going to be one he wants to tell, because it's his best friend. It might be a career-ending injury. And something strange happens, which is that the staff of the stadium say, you know, Will is calling for Gabby to come down to see him because he's in that much pain. He needs her by his side. And so this is uncalled for. They don't usually do that. Gabby and Sophie and Nick are kind of in the box with all the players' wives. So Gabby is rushed down, and the crowd parts to let her through to see her boyfriend, who then is on one knee and then proposes to her. And of course she says yes, and it's this all big ruse to just do this huge announcement. And this kind of hits Sophie and Nick into a sore spot because they had been together longer than Will and Gabby. And, the younger sister is getting married before the older sister. That's also a social issue. But it also comes down to the fact that what we learn about Sophie in this period is that she's a very determined and independent woman
Right.
who avoids the subject of marriage. And Nick is the type of guy who's very interested in it but doesn't really want to bring it up because every time she has dodged the question. So he's just kind of like he's just stuck in a comfort zone right now. So what did you make of this kind of like opening act setup and parallel between the couples of Nick and Sophie versus the couple of Will and Gabby?
Well, for starters, I just want to say that when I read this script, I didn't read any description, any log line, anything about it. I just dived in and read it without knowing anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't even know. I like to do this. Like even if you're in your email, you detailed more about it. I think I didn't read. I quickly just went and read the screenplay because I tried to know as little as possible. And when I was watching it, and I didn't even know that this would have like a body swap element to it,
Mm-hmm.
I thought that this was pretty decently done for a movie like this, even without the body swapping. I think that the idea that he's considering proposing, but then there's sort of a mirror with the sister and the guy that he's his friend, and it's at this the baseball player. I thought that this was an interesting parallel,
Mm-hmm.
and it was decently done. It's not groundbreaking. It's not like they reinvented the wheel, but I think that if you're just going by classic like ideas that work in a screenplay, I think that it certainly gets the job done in that sense.
Oh yeah, they're leaning into the trope.
Totally, but it's fine.
Yeah.
Sometimes, see, a lot of times we have these days in Hollywood and in writing in general, you have that idea of let's subvert expectations instead of the regular trope. Let's just do something out of left field. It's so great. But then when you watch it, you think to yourself, well, those things may be tropes, but they're tropes sometimes because at least you know that if you put them in the right way and utilize them correctly, they will get the job done. Maybe there's ways to make them fresher. Maybe you can invent new tropes. But some people, can't do that. Even writers, they're not that good. And the other thing is, sometimes you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You go for something simple. Mirror. They're having a thing with their relationship and marriage. Meanwhile, the sister and this other player, which are sort of a mirror of this couple, everything is going seemingly well for them. And now they do want to get married. So it really shines a spotlight on the issues that they're having.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, if they were to subvert expectations in this, because again, this is not a subversion. Even if you're trying to do something new without, the whole goal is, are you trying to demoralize and deconstruct it, or are you trying to inject a surprise and make it refreshing? To demoralize and to deconstruct would be subversion. That would be like the moment Will would get on his knee to propose, the entire crowd would start booing. Because they're like, what are you doing with the marriage thing? And then she would say no. And then when she says no, they would cheer her for saying no. That would be a subversion of expectations.
That's what would happen if Rian Johnson were making this movie.
Sure. And the other part too is like when you do it at this early into the story, it is a subversion. Whereas if you were to say do that at the end of the story and we learn that the guy proposing is a jerk and the girl is like, in love with another guy, but she's, apprehensive from actually like distancing yourself from the person that would propose, then you're not subverting expectations. Then you're enabling the surprise, which is that you don't know if she's going to say yes and you're hoping that she says no when this jerk proposes to her. And when they propose, and then, the stadium would say boo and stuff, and she says no, and then they cheer. You're like, yes, that's the entire movie, and in sync with the audience, wanting her to not be with this bad guy and go be with this other guy. So fortunately for us in this script, they don't do that. They play into it. They play it out as, yes, this is a trope. This is a guy who's pulled a stunt to get his girlfriend on the field so he can pop her the question. She says yes, everything's happy. They go on, play baseball. And then we time jump 6 months later where Sophie and Nick kind of feel like are presented now in a different light, where there's some tension between them because Sophie is getting out of like the bedroom dressed in an upscale casual outfit, asking Nick, hey, are you, ready to go out? And Nick is watching basketball and he's confused and disoriented because he's been focusing on the game. And we find out that, she's, as a food critic, has been invited to a restaurant opening. It's a free meal. And she wants her boyfriend to join her. And Nick's reaction is not the best for a boyfriend who decided to put a basketball game ahead of a free meal at a new restaurant, apparently a high-class one, which I thought is weird. It's like, I can TiVo a good game. If I'm getting a free meal, I'm going for a free meal.
Well, sometimes, and I think that I myself, I like sports well enough, but it's not a situation where I have to like clear my schedule to watch a game now and things like that. It's like if there's some people around and there's a good game, yeah, I can watch it. And it's not like they don't repel me, sports. I don't dislike it. But I know people that if there's a game that they want to watch, and especially this guy who's like a baseball writer, so he's like really into sports, I could see why there could be a game that they'd be totally into. So for me, if you ask me what I would do if somebody said, hey, do you want to go to like a Michelin star restaurant and just like have the best meal ever? I'd say yes, and I don't care about the game at all. I don't even have to TiVo it. Like, I don't even care if I later look like on Google to see what the score was. I'd rather have like the VIP meal.
Right.
But there are people that live and breathe sports, and I have friends that are like that. So it's not that I can't understand why the guy in his shoes wouldn't want to go to the meal. It's just when I think of myself, I probably would go to the meal.
Right, but one of the things I found good about this is that it's a very definitive behavioral choice for Nick, where we realize, so he covers baseball exclusively, but he does like other sports, and he likes to be informed about other sports. But we're at this situation where he's picking sports over his girlfriend right now, and she calls him out on it, and then he kind of like tries to compromise. He's like, well, maybe we can wait until halftime and then we can go. And then Sophie they're kind of both kind of skirting around the idea like, food brings people together. And Nick's saying, well, sports brings people together. And they're both right, but they both seem to see a separation of the two distinctly. And I thought it was kind of a funny little conflict because it was basically showing them at a level of comfort where they could have an argument, and instead of trying to stick it out and resolve it there, they're like, okay, we're not even going to conclude this argument. I'm just going to go do what I'm supposed to do. You can sit on the couch and be a potato watching the sports game. I'm going to go out with my sister. and you get conveyed exactly like, oh, these two are in trouble now. And it's really quickly done. It's like only a page and a quarter. Like they get through it really fast. And I have to give my props to the writing team for not dwelling or circling the drain over the conflict. They're just kind of getting in, getting out. And then we get our first kind of one-on-one with Gabby and Sophie. We get to see what these sisters are really like, and see how Sophie complains about her man and how Gabby loves her fiance.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, one of the subjects of conversation, and this is also a good character defining moment as well, is Sophie and Gabby are talking about the wedding, and Gabby is excited to say that she's going to be the future Mrs. Cartwright, and then Sophie has that eye roll thing of like, oh, you're taking his name, that's so conventional, and why would you do that? And the other part too is like Gabby just kind of bites back. She says like, she loves him, and she loves him that much, and that's why she's going to do that. That's why she's going to take his name. And it's a very fair argument. It's not like, oh, she doesn't lean into it's tradition, which is actually kind of good. She says no, she's doing it because she loves him. That's why she's going to take his name. So it's not a straw man argument in defense of it's not a straw man argument to defend against Sophie's presupposition. It's basically Gabby saying, I'm going to do what I want. This is what I want. I do it because I love him. And I don't care about hyphenating or what have you, what other people would do. This is what I want to do. And I thought it was kind of nice because it shows a little bit of Sophie's headspace. It shows Gabby's headspace as well. And this also feeds into the most important beat that comes in this first act, which is when Nick and Will are together. They're hanging out, and we see Will's this really affable type of guy. He'll take photos with teenagers that are fans and not charge them. But he basically, we get this great scene between the two of them where Will basically tells Nick, he's like, I couldn't see myself with anyone else other than Gabby, and you've been with Sophie for so long. Why don't you just, take the step, get a ring, and force the situation so that you can actually get a definitive answer to know if there is actually something going on with this relationship. If you love her, just pop the question. After this long, you should be popping the question. And then Nick has this joke asking if Dale, the ball club manager, if he's paying Will to commit to help him commit to this, because the running joke is the Cubs really want Nick and Sophie to tie the knot. And I thought it was a good set. Those three scenes back to back, I thought really did paint a nice little arc around where each of these characters are.
It's like you also said before. I think that one of the things that this screenplay does correctly is that it gets to the point quickly. We're in a few scenes into the movie, and I very quickly understand who the main characters are, who kind of the side characters are, the kind of mirroring of this relationship, that relationship. It really moves things along at a steady pace, and in that sense, I think it does it fine. It's not that something, like I said, it's not that something necessarily groundbreaking is happening here, but it's somebody that whoever the people that wrote this, they understand the basics of how to get this thing moving.
They do. They understand the basics. They understand the pacing. They want to cover all the stuff that's very important. They're usually doing the Alfred Hitchcock thing, which is, drama is life with the boring parts cut out, and they're making sure that every part so far is not boring. It's got a purpose. It's like, okay, we're setting up a scene between Nick and Sophie. What are they like at this point? They're kind of miserable. They are happy to spend a night not with each other. That is the state of their relationship. When Sophie is with Gabby, we find more about Sophie being, independent, not wanting to be chained down or shackled, but still believing in love and whatnot. And then when we see Nick and Will together, we're like, well, Nick really wants to propose to her, but has never been able to kind of cross that threshold because of Sophie's attitude towards marriage and what she thinks that means. And this is actually an interesting question so this is presented as a factual way, but what I really liked about this first act is the fact that we've now got a mystery established as to, between Sophie and Gabby, why is Sophie the one that is more apprehensive about marriage versus Gabby? Like, what is that strange attractor? What is the inciting incident for her to have this point of view? And we actually do get an answer to that towards the end of the script. But it's a nice little question that's kind of underlining the actions of Sophie for this excuse me, for this script. And we get a little bit of an answer to that because as Sophie is kind of editing her latest food review, she gets a phone call from a headhunter who is working for the New York Times, who wants to hire her or get her hired as a food critic for that newspaper. And that's a big job, and it's a big step up from, I guess, being like a social media news critic, is my understanding.
Honestly, these days, I don't even know if to tell you if it's a step up. If you're like a social media and you're really big on YouTube, you probably would be better sticking with that. But I understand that the movie is going for the classic kind of the New York Times is a big name. Also, I don't know what kind of blog she has or how many people are reading it.
Right.
It's not important. The thing is, obviously, it's a big job, and again, this is very economical. There's a lot there within a few scenes. There's a lot of exposition,
Hmm.
introductions to characters, explaining who they are, what makes them tick, but also moving the plot along. You have that kind of proposal there. You have them not proposing and not getting married. Meanwhile, you have this job offer. So all of this is happening very quickly. But like I said, I think it's better. The one thing you don't want in a movie, you don't want, and especially like this one, you don't want like 70 scenes of exposition.
Right.
Uh, we've seen so many movies, especially like, from Marvel and Disney and whatever in recent years, that like the exposition is so clunky. I mean, I don't know if you saw Captain America: Brave New World, but there's so many portions of that movie that just feel like exposition dumps. Uh,
No, I did, and you're not incorrect there. There's definitely a lot of exposition dumps. This one, I mean, to its credit, like they get the exposition done in that opening narration quickly because they just want to get you into the meat and potatoes of this relationship.
Yeah, yeah, they're moving at a steady pace. That's what I said. That
Yep.
that the one thing, the biggest compliment I can give them, and maybe on their entire script, like you said before, they hit the ground running. Things are happening. It's moving along at a steady pace. You already know there's a wedding. You already know about the relationship. You already know about the job. That's it. And that there's something keeping her that she doesn't like, this kind of patriarchy, whatever, getting married, while the other one, she's in love and wants to get married. There's a lot of things that are just very quickly, you also learn the type of guy that Will is, that he's nice to his fans, he's successful, but he also cares about, Nick and what happens with his relationship. You also know who Dale is. A lot of things very quickly have been presented. And in that sense, I actually have something like that's a positive for me. It doesn't matter. We've said it before. I'm not looking at it now as I like science fiction. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? For me, give me like a good classic Star Wars, Star Trek, or something like that, or Back to the Future,
Hmm.
an adventure like Indiana Jones. So yeah, maybe this movie isn't necessarily the genre that I like get up in the morning like dreaming of seeing. But if I'm looking at it professionally, they're doing the right things here.
Yeah, I would have to say they're doing the right things and they're playing up the dramatic irony a lot. So, what we have here, we got a twofold dramatic irony. The first fold is that we find out Sophie just is getting a job opportunity to work in New York. At the exact same time, Nick has actually decided to splurge and buy an engagement ring. So now you have these two conflicts. You're like, okay, you have one opportunity, which is to settle down with your boyfriend as your husband. And the other opportunity is you get to go to New York and live there, but they live in Chicago. So you know that these two actions are going to conflict with each other and they're going to come to a head. And we don't get a buffer scene between the time Sophie gets the job offer, the time Nick goes to get the ring, because the very next scene is they're in a fancy restaurant. It's Nick and Sophie together. They're both nervous. They're celebrating their 4-year anniversary, and Nick is really eager to propose, but he's also, the loving boyfriend. So when they both have something to say, he does the gentlemanly thing and says, "You go first." And so she drops the ball that, hey, I got this job offer from the New York Times. And Nick doesn't know how to take that exactly because he's a smart enough guy to realize what that actually means. If you're working for the New York Times as a food and you're a food critic and you got to be on the food scene, well, New York is going to want you. New York Times is going to want you to do the food scene of New York, which isn't Chicago, and Nick has all the wind taken out of his sails because he's literally got in his pocket the engagement ring, and his entire plan to propose to her is kind of shot now. And the other part too is that Sophie doesn't even pitch it in the most positive way as it pertains to their relationship, because as Nick's trying to process this and he's talking to Sophie about it, she's not suggesting that Nick comes with her.
She's not thinking about him at all, and I
Right.
think that's part of the reason that he has the issue. But again, uh, I think that scene where he's thinking about the proposal and she's thinking about her job, I think that that's a well set up conflict.
Hmm.
I also like how it wasn't that I think that they wanted to present one person as a villain and one person as a good person. I think that it just shows how they're not in the same place,
Yeah, they're not in
and
sync. Yeah.
they're not in sync and they're not on the same page. And I think that that's what the scene is trying to get, and it achieves it.
It really does achieve it. I mean, one of the things, a good shocking moment within the scene is Nick does the hypothetical. He says, like, if I said no for you to do this job, would you go anyway? And she doesn't answer. And that says a lot because that's pretty much her not even entertaining the idea of staying. And then she tries to roll it back, but it's also, you know, she then tries to roll it back and say, well, I was going to ask if you consider moving with her, out there. And he doesn't quite, excuse me, he doesn't quite buy that, even though when she argues, like, how because he follows the Cubs, he's on the road half the season anyways, not really in Chicago. But then Nick kind of puts himself into the position of being the bad guy of the argument this time by saying, but he likes living in Chicago. Like, that's where he wants to be. And Sophie then pushes back. That's where you've always been. Like, that type of thing of, you don't want to move forward with your life. You're comfortable here. I want to take this opportunity. I want to see something exciting. That classic trope of stay safe to go out on an adventure, right? And what I liked about this scene is that it vacillates between which character is actually being the unreasonable one here, because Nick will make a good point, then Sophie will look like the bad guy, and then she'll make a good point, and then Nick will look like the bad guy. And I like this because it builds off, that first scene where we see them together, where they're not in sync, and both of them, and with Sophie wants to go out and he just wants to stay in place. Now we have another argument that does the same thing. She wants to leave and he wants to stay in place, and it's building up their conflict where they're not fully acknowledging the needs of the other person. And it's a good scene because it ends with them essentially breaking up. And
Right, and that's also getting to the point. They're breaking up now,
yeah,
but then they add that thing to Hawaii that they all have to go to, and yeah, I mean, I think that progresses in a logical way too. That now it's her sister and it's his best friend, and they have their wedding, and they don't want to make it about their whole breakup, so they're like, let's put on this charade.
yeah, we
Just
can
for this
pretend.
week.
Yeah, we can pretend to still be together until after the wedding, because like Nick is ready to, like, he's. What's interesting is when they go back to their apartment, Nick is actually the guy packing up his suitcase ready to go. So the actions are kind of reversed, right? She's not the one leaving the apartment. He is, and he's basically saying, "I'm going to go stay with Will," and then Sophie reminds him, "You can't do that, because if you go to stay with Will, he's going to know that we're not together, and that's going to throw him off with regards to the wedding. That's a selfish and horrible thing to do. We are going to figure this out, and then after the wedding, when they come back, then we'll tell them that we're not together anymore."
Which, by the way, I agree with.
Yep.
Sometimes something happens and you think, well, this is so stupid that somebody would say that. But no, it's her sister and it's his best friend. And I really do think that just right before the wedding, to bring all that drama, it really is a crappy thing to do.
Oh,
So the
100%.
fact that she would say, well, let's just pretend for the next week, just so for their sake, and then we'll do this. This actually makes sense to me.
And the other part too is, like, Nick is in full agreement. He's like, "Yeah, I did not realize that. I don't want to screw up my friend's wedding." And I like the fact that the writers brought this up in this manner, because I have read a number of scripts where you have the characters decide, okay, yeah, our conflict is now going to be the conflict for everyone else. We're going to tell everyone that we're broken up during the wedding or what have you. Or you have the inverse, where you have a couple that falls in love, and during the wedding ceremony or the reception, one of the characters proposes to the other, and it's like you're literally trying to steal the attention away from the bride and groom with your proposal. I'm like, that's terrible behavior too, and that should be frowned upon. I mean, I've been at only 2 weddings where that happened, and both times I have hated the 2 people that did that, and both times their marriages failed as well, because it was never about love. It was about, hey, everybody's here, all of our friends. Why don't I propose to my girlfriend and save myself having to do that, elsewhere?
It also shows that they're both, even though maybe they're fighting with each other now,
Hmm.
they're both pretty decent people. Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, even though they're not getting along with the relationship, she's saying something that's very unselfish, and he's thinking about it, and he agrees. So it shows something actually positive about the both of them. Even if they can't get along, you can somehow appreciate that they're putting their friends and family above their stupid drama.
Right. These writers
Not stupid,
understand
but
what
of their drama.
empathy is.
Right, exactly. It required a little bit of like nuance that a lot of writers don't have. I agree with this writing strategy with whatever they did here as well.
Right. I mean, the other part too is it also emboldens the conflict, right? It's like, okay, they're broken up. Well, we can't tell our friends right now because we don't want to ruin their wedding, which means that this conflict is going to build and build because they have to try and pretend to be together when they don't want to be together at a wedding that's supposed to be celebrating a union of two people who want to be together. I mean,
Right,
that's a great conflict. Like that's what you want
right.
to
It's a
do.
good setup. It's setting everything up properly. It's doing everything correctly.
It is, and then once that is done, like we're not even, I think we're page 15 or so into the script. Now we're in Hawaii. Now we're at the destination wedding. You know, another trope of certain romantic comedies, destination weddings. Everybody's got to go fly to an exotic place to get married. I don't know if that's really for. I wonder if they're doing that because if you got married in California, it's a no fault state, and that causes issues with divorce down the road. So if you get married in another country, maybe it make things a lot easier if that marriage doesn't work out in the end. I don't know. I haven't had many friends that did destination weddings. That's interesting.
I
This,
once went to a destination wedding in Chicago, but that wasn't much of a Hawaii thing. That was like kind of random.
yeah, that's like really Chicago.
It's like the opposite of what's happening in this movie, if you think about it.
Yeah.
Like the destination where these guys don't want to be. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's funny. So yeah, now we get hit with the barrage of okay. Now we're meeting some of the family. So we got the parents of I think it's Sophie's parents, Sophie and Gabby's parents, Brenda and Larry, and then then we got Nick's friends, which I guess are also kind of Will's friends, which is Fish and Skip. And I guess they're two guys that he befriended in college in Boston. And they're described as being big, obnoxious Boston guys, but they're both married. And they left their wives at home with the kids. And they're talking about, they're basically just perverts, talking about all the women they are planning to try and hook up with on this because both these guys are apparently in an open relationship or an open marriage. And I don't know
Apparently,
about
yeah.
you, but I felt like, why are there two of these guys when one would suffice?
I thought only one was they were both in open marriages.
I think so because both of them were talking about nailing women and then, wanting to grab other women's boobs and stuff like that. And it's like,
I
well,
thought there was only one that said that, but I agree with you. If it was both of them, maybe I read it. That part, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I read it and just didn't think about it. I thought that one was like the open relationship and the other one was single. If that's not the case, that's the way it should have been.
see, I thought that at first too, but then one of them says, like, he can't drink anymore because he can't stand the hangovers, and all he wants to do is give his wife Jen a break and spend time with the kids. And then the other guy is talking about how his wife is probably back home getting railed by the Celtics.
I
And
think you're right now.
and I'm like,
Y-
oh,
y-
these two are like the same character. Why are there two of them? They should be one character because we don't need both of them. They don't have distinct voices or anything, and their antics are just kind of chewing up screen time. And I'm always a big fan of like stories with a smaller character count are more efficient and more fun because you're giving each character gets their one special thing that sets them apart of everyone else. And how here we got Skip and Fish, who it's two guys that are the same, like exactly the same. They don't know how to
You know
tie
what?
bow ties. They're obnoxious. They like to drink.
I agree with you, and I think that while I was reading this screenplay, that's something that popped into my mind that they are. I didn't. I thought that one was single, but something about the way they talked and acted was very similar.
Hmm.
And there were times where it says like Fish or Skip that in my mind I couldn't even. I just kind of saw them as one unit.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like I couldn't really even. If
distinguish.
you asked me, yeah, if you asked me now what Skip said and what Fish said, I wouldn't even know. As far as I'm concerned, they're kind of just. I saw them as one entity, actually.
Exactly, and it also off balances everything because we also get the introduction of Emma, who is Sophie's friend, and to a point Gabby's friend. Like they're friends. But Emma's a lesbian, but it's not like dwelled upon on that, in the sense that the only way it's dwelled upon with her being a lesbian is the fact that every time she kind of interacts with another woman that kind of smiles or gives her a sign, she's like, no, I promised myself I would not get wrapped up into a relationship while I'm out here. Like she's single right now. She wants to stay single. That's it. And that's the most you really get out of what she's doing, because she's not man-hating, because she likes Nick, and she doesn't like Fish and Skip, but that's understandable. No one should like them. She likes Will, right. Like Emma likes Will. So she's not a man-hating one. And then we also find out that Emma is very self-conscious because she doesn't want to be too feminine, that the butch lesbians don't like her, and she doesn't want to be too butch that the very feminine lesbians don't like her.
Right.
So you've got some, and that's kind of like the only thing that they really play about it on that part. The rest of the time, she's just a friend there trying to be supportive to Sophie and Gabby, and to an extent Nick, while they're at this wedding. And so far, like, nobody knows that Sophie and Nick have broken up. And so, but we get those introductions. They're very quick and very snappy. We then get the cliche of Uncle Richard, who apparently always asks very inappropriate questions to people. But this is a part where I think the writers kind of missed the boat, because the questions he asks, while they're inappropriate, they're not so much so that they make you laugh out loud. Because right. The first question he asks is like, let me ask you how much you're worth, Will. I'm like, yeah, that's inappropriate, but that's kind of like safe territory.
Yeah, wasn't too. You're right. That wasn't like absolutely unreasonable that somebody would ask.
Right, but I think a more unreasonable question would be like, if he's an Uncle Richard, if he's in his 60s, he'd have like a photo of a cyst on his butt or something. Like, hey, does that look, cankerous to you or something? And then get everybody's opinion, because that's inappropriate. It's like, don't show someone a photo of a body part and ask their opinion, because that's more of like that's the outrageous stuff you kind of want to do with that. With Uncle Richard, like, he's set up as that's what he does, and then the inappropriate questions I found were kind of tame. Not the point. The joke he tells much later on the script, also, I've heard it a million times before. I was really hoping the writers would have come up with an original joke. That's where you stand out.
Right. The joke that they told was I
the liver in the vagina joke.
Right, and I remember that what's his face, Marty Funkhauser, Bob Einstein on Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Right.
In that season with Seinfeld, there's some weird thing that he tells Seinfeld this joke. So most people, I don't know where the joke originated, but I'll say that after that thing, most people kind of really associate the joke with that guy in that scene.
Yeah.
So when I saw that they were just reusing that, I was kind of disappointed.
Me too, because and this is advice for anyone out there writing a comedy script, especially a romantic comedy script, but if you're going to have someone say, hey, I'm going to have this character tell a joke, don't rely on an existing joke. Try and come up with another one, especially if it's a story or what have you. Because Ben Stiller was taught this lesson by his father, Jerry Stiller, actually I think on a Conan O'Brien's show, where Ben Stiller was trying to say, oh yeah, lots of funny things happen, and Jerry Stiller was saying, don't tell him lots of funny things happen, just get into the story. Go to the story, like, for instance, these newlyweds, they just got married, they get into the limousine, they're heading towards the airport. The wife, the newlywed wife says to the husband, oh my gosh, I just realized we don't have protection for the honeymoon night. I mean, I know we're married, and I know we don't want to start a family right away, but we should probably be protection. Let's swing by the corner store, the drugstore. And the husband's like, yes, absolutely. I'll go and I'll get some condoms. And before he leaves, he says, is there anything else you need me to get from the drugstore? She says, yeah, because we're going on a cruise, could you get me some Dramamine because I don't want to be seasick? And he's like, absolutely. So he goes into the drugstore. He talks to the guy behind the counter. He says, I'd like a pack of condoms and a pack of Dramamine. And, the drugstore says, great, but if you want the condoms, why do you want it to, get the seasick out so quick at the same time? Like, and that was the joke I just botched. But, you get to the point, right? Like, don't come up with your own joke.
Right, exactly.
Make it kind of on the fly and showcase your skills as a comedian and also as a storyteller to get something that's going to stand out, because it's a monologue in a script, which means that on as a director and as an audience, you're expecting to have this be the focus at this point, and you want it to stand out. You want people to be like spitting out their soda in the movie theater from the laughter or the punchline or what have you, and you want them to be able to say, "There's this crazy story joke in this script that you just won't believe. You got to go see the movie." And ideally, you would botch that joke telling it to your friends, just as I botched the Jerry Stiller joke I just did right here on the show.
It's fine, but no, I understand exactly what you meant. Yeah, I mean, for sure, when I read it, I knew the joke very well. I knew where the most famous, telling of that joke was, and that's why it really kind of took me out of reading the script. And I'm thinking, I know this word for word. This is just a dumb thing,
Right.
but this is something that they can work on later. Somebody could just give them a note and say, "Hey, replace that joke."
Right. Exactly. And so that felt kind of, and that goes into the other part here, like the Fish and Skip stuff. It is all very kind of boilerplate. Hey, do you want to do some lines? I got some Adderall or cocaine, or I got a guy, or what have you. And you're just like, well, okay, so these are the two obnoxious guys that are going to break all the rules and get away scot-free, and they're always forever immature. So why the heck, why the heck even do anything inventive with them? Like they're there for the shock and awe, and also to throw out stupid ideas that they could be the butt of the joke, and they don't contribute to the story in any way. I found, and just like with that joke that they get, the uncle to say, it doesn't, Uncle Richard, it doesn't contribute to the story. It's there, and even if they're trying to say, well, it's there to make you laugh, to your point, it's a joke that we have heard probably for the last 30 years, at least on cable television.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, like those are kind of like the hangups that they don't screw up the pace of the story, but they definitely put some speed bumps into the flow with character interactions, and we don't really get that with when Emma and Sophie are together, or when Nick and Will are together. There's still flow, there's still progression, everything kind of feels in sync. But as soon as you throw in Fish and Skip, it's like, oh, we're stopping the story so that these guys can be fools for a beat, and then we're going to jump ahead. And then the script makes a move which I don't think was a smart one, in my opinion, but maybe other audiences would like it, and that is, as soon as Fish and Skip and Nick are alone, Nick tells those two idiots that he and Sophie are broken up, and then tells them not to tell anybody. And you're like, well, these are the two guys that, if anything, you get them drunk enough, they're going to spill the beans. So why would you even risk telling them that situation? Why not just take advantage of the fact that these guys are fools, but also make them two extra obstacles to keeping the breakup between Nick and Sophie a secret, because these two guys are going to be saying stuff or wanting to do stuff with them and forcing them together.
Too quick.
Yeah.
They were too quick to let the cat out of the bag, and maybe there's a way to have them discover it in a way that feels more like that they didn't want to tell them, but they discovered it somehow.
Yeah. I mean, and then on top of that, we get the same thing with Sophie and Emma. Sophie tells Emma. So now we have three new variables that know this secret that could compromise the very thing they're trying not to have compromise their wedding. And I'm looking at this as a writer, and I'm thinking, no, these are three extra obstacles for them to hide the secret from. And because they're friends, and because you can excuse Will and Gabby being occupied with their responsibilities in the wedding, these are now the three people that come into that place of friendship to basically challenge the commitment they have to trying to maintain the illusion that they're still together. And the moment you tell them that they're not together, there's no more challenge. There's no more conflict opportunities there. It's now, at best, these three are going to support these two with the ruse, but even though, unfortunately, the script never really has them support each other with the ruse, because we then get in pretty close to the twist, which is this romantic waterfall in Hawaii, and we get a story of it done. It is exposition, but it's done very cleverly by the way of the fact that it's based off of Will and Gabby's first vacation date, because they first vacationed to this resort in Hawaii many years ago. They learned that if you go under the waterfall and you say the three things that you love most about your partner, that this waterfall's magic will protect those things so that your love will flourish for all eternity, type of stuff.
Right.
And and of course, Nick and Sophie kind of scoff at the idea, but when everybody else is kind of they're there, Sophie loses her necklace around that part and doesn't realize until much later. So she goes back to the waterfall to get it, and of course Nick is encouraged to go after her because he's the boyfriend. He should be helping her find jewelry.
Right.
And he was still in like ex-boyfriend mode where she leaves and he's just like, continuing doing what he's doing. And everybody's like, aren't you going to go after? And he's like, oh yeah, right. Sorry. And then gets up.
That was good, actually. Yeah. That part was correct. Yes.
That part was good. And so, so they're searching around the waterfall and they're arguing with each other about the necklace and about how each one is selfish, and they're making these sarcastic points. And then she slips and he goes to catch her and they topple over. They fall into the water. And then when they come back up, he's got the necklace. He's like, oh, I found your necklace. And she's like, okay, thank you. And then she gets all upset because her hair is wet. And he makes a sarcastic joke about, well, good thing like there's, blow dryers that exist, because it's not like it's, going to stay wet forever. And then they return to their room. She's sleeping on the bed. He's relegated to the couch. And so the next morning, they wake up and they are shocked to find that they're in each other's body. And what was your reaction when you saw this, considering the fact that you didn't read the log line and you went into it cold?
I mean, once they were in the waterfall, I started thinking to myself where they're going to go with it. I mean, I'm trying to think if it crossed my mind. But once they woke up, and really very early, like the first few sentences, I'm like, okay, I get where this is all going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I thought it was interesting. I mean, for whatever this movie is supposed to be, it's sort of like a rom-com that is trying to be not just solely for women, maybe to have your boyfriend go with you and not suffer, plus a little bit of like a mystical kind of thing with a fantasy or whatever you want to call it, that they're both kind of switching places. So, yeah, I mean, I thought it was fine. When I was interested in where it was going, but when I saw it, I thought to myself, okay, well, they did do a lot of setup, putting them in this situation that they're at the wedding and then they're, amidst a breakup and they're switching places. That's certainly a good build-up for that.
Yeah.
If you were going to go that creative direction. Now, I'll tell you this, that also when I saw it, I thought to myself, so many times in my life I've seen this swapping thing. So, it's not as like kind of novel to me when I look at it now. But at the same time, when I thought of all the build-up until that moment, I thought that they did a pretty decent job.
Yeah, I did too. One of the things I did appreciate is that the script makes a very short note to the reader saying, I'm not changing the names of the characters in the script because that's going to be confusing. You're going to tell, based on the hints I lay out to you, that they're not opposite bodies. So when you're reading, the lines for Nick, it's still Nick, but at this point, he's in Sophie's body and vice versa. Whereas in the other script, they put both names together and it got confusing because you were still getting jumbled as to who is who in whose body. And this one here, you clearly know what's going on. Like these writers were able to really keep the context and also build around each situation so that you know who is what and what they're doing, and that the other people outside don't realize that, Nick is in Sophie's bodies and Sophie's in Nick's body.
I agree. I thought that was pretty good. When I was reading it, I thought to myself that it's probably best that they do it this way. Even with that at the beginning, I was still a bit like, oh, he's in this body, she's in that. It took me it's something that if you see it on screen, it's probably a lot easier. Mm-hmm. But when you're reading it, you have to sort of get used to this new flow in your mind, even though they gave you the easier route to do it. But yeah, I agree with their decision not to write both names, basically.
Right. And I mean, and their instant reactions are very immature but very understandable. Like Nick is shocked that he's got a pair of breasts and he's not happy about it. He's just kind of freaking out. And Sophie is almost on the verge of having a mental collapse when she sees that she's a man. Which I think for actors to play and for us as an audience to see, that could be quite, the way that they have it laid out in the script, it could actually be quite entertaining because it is that Freaky Friday thing at a different level. But one of the stuff that the writers did in this, and it's something that I constantly say for other writers, don't reference a gimmick you're using that was used in another movie, because it's going to make other people think about that movie instead of yours. And because yours is still in the screenplay format, that movie is already better than what you're writing because it was made and it got out there. So don't remind people of a better story than what you're writing, because that's going to hurt what you're trying to do. And these guys unfortunately do that. But they think they're hallucinating.
They're like, oh, we Freaky Friday. Yeah, I didn't need that. I agree with you.
Yeah, they didn't need that at all. It's like they could have said, it's a body swap. Like, I don't care what it is. I want to get out of here, just circumvent around that part. But they make their first effort of, okay, if we're hallucinating, well, let's run, because you can't run in a dream, or at least so they think. So they're running around and they're saying weird things, and Nick is running for the first time with breasts, and it's causing an issue, so he's got to hold them as he's running, which I think would be a funny sight gag. And then Sophie is still freaking out over this, and when they realize that, oh, this is not a dream or hallucination, that this is the real thing, they realize, oh, it was that stupid waterfall story is actually real. And of course they're both talking about it cynically, but they don't have any other explanation. And then what happens is, before they're even able to figure out what to do next, Will's parents show up. So that's Linda and Neil. And, Linda goes to Sophie to talk food, and Neil goes to Nick to talk sports. And of course, Nick doesn't know much about food and Sophie doesn't know much about sports. So they're both trying to BS their way through that and not succeeding. And it does start to spark up some curiosity with them. But this all happens like as soon as the first act ends, we are in the body swap. So like page 27, 26. And this screenplay is like 107 pages. So we've got a lot of real estate with these two in each other's body, trying to navigate what to do, because it's not enough that they have to pretend to stay together to not distract from the wedding, but now they're in each other's body on top of that. So we've now doubled the conflict and the obstacles they have to face.
Right.
So my question for you, Price, is we get a scene where both Nick and Sophie go to their friends, Emma, Fish, and Skip directly, and just as they did before with, hey, we're broken up, it's now, hey, we're in each other's body. So how did you like the exchange in the washroom where they're kind of asking each other's questions that only they would know in order to confirm whether or not they actually body swapped? What were your thoughts of that scene, and how did it work for you?
My thoughts were that a lot of that was like nonsense, but at this point, if you're already like invested in the movie, you kind of figure that this is kind of a nonsensical movie. You're not going to get like, as much as I've been saying that they've been doing things correctly, it is kind of a silly, nonsensical rom-com fantasy thing. So based on my expectations here, of where this is heading and the kind of genre it is, I've seen movies that they do something similar, like what you do here, where you told them in the bathroom. To me, it seems very quick, very unearned, and they could have maybe held out a little more, or tried to do something else to convince them, or maybe tried to keep it a secret. That would be interesting as well. But they didn't go for that. They just went quickly to tell them, and quickly those other guys believe them, which is kind of strange, because why would anybody believe something like this?
Yeah. No, I agree. So even though we get over that hurdle where now the friends are like, okay, you guys have switched bodies, we believe you, we'll help you out with this. What is it you guys got to do? And so they decide, okay, we're going to go back to the waterfall. Maybe we can get this reversed. So they jump back in, and the first thing that happens is they don't switch their bodies, but Nick in Sophie's body is remarking how the water is a lot colder than it was yesterday. And Sophie's kind of making fun of him because she's been telling him for years that, girls feel cold differently than guys. Like when they say they're cold, and guys like you and me are like, it's fine. We don't notice it, but now because Nick's in her body, he's noticing it. And this is where the screenplay is giving you the obvious hint, if you haven't picked up on it already, is that this body swap has happened so that both of them can actually experience each other's lives from a different point of view, so they can better understand each other. And
right. I mean, again, this isn't rocket science. You already know this is a rom-com. You know why they're switching, and you know pretty much where this is all heading. But like I said, this is a genre that especially, I know ladies. I recently, a woman told me this, that, oh, I like rom-coms. Yeah, they're stupid. I love them. You know what I mean? That's a real sentence that somebody told me. And I think that represents a lot of women. And again, you bring a guy over, for a date night. If it's something that has a little bit of fantasy, a little bit of baseball, a little bit of comedy, maybe you can get the guy on board, with a likable enough casting in the movie. You can get a guy on board for like a date night. I don't think anybody sees these movies and thinks like, oh, this has to be like the Godfather of rom-coms,
Right. No, I mean, if you're trying to advertise a rom-com as that, you are shooting above your weight class, because they have a niche. It works in that niche. Leave it there. Try to experiment, but understand what your target audience is. Yeah.
The only one that I think like was a few levels above, and honestly that I can think of, and honestly the one that I'm about to tell you, it was basically, in a way, it cemented this genre in general, is like Harry Met Sally.
Yeah.
If you watch Harry Met Sally, there is real dialogue there and real situations that feel a little more interesting than a lot of the more. It sort of created a situation where people were like, okay, we get it, we understand the template, and now we're going to make a million movies like that. But honestly, they don't have the depth that one has. I actually think that even though Harry Met Sally is a rom-com, it has more to it. It's like the conversations, the what they're building there. It feels like you're dealing on a level above most of these things that we see today, in my opinion.
Right. And I think that's I think that's a good movie standard to set for people writing a rom-com, because it does go beyond what they are typical. It's like, oh, okay, these are just friends. They're doing their thing. There's some tension there. Will they? Won't they?
They didn't put 7 friends there. They knew very well that he has one friend, she has one friend, and they got them together in that case, which was hilarious. Until today, I remember that scene that they're trying to set each other up, and then Carrie Fisher ends up going with that guy. I can't remember the actor's name, and I'm ashamed because he passed away. Really like that actor.
Oh,
he was in The Godfather, I think, as a young Clemenza or something. In any case, you know who I'm talking about.
Yes. I'm just losing the name too, so sorry.
What was his name?
I can't remember the name. I'm knocking my head over it right now.
So basically, I think that scene that they're trying to set each other up, and then they both end up in the same cab and they go home. That was really well done. It was also nice, Carrie Fisher really got to show what she's capable of doing in the scenes that she's in, and I thought that she was great in it. That movie really... see, the cool thing about Harry Met Sally is that I don't think that somebody sat there and said, let's do a rom-com. They just wanted a movie that's sort of a comedy but also has a relationship, and I don't think that they were thinking now that all the movies are going to use that as a blueprint. I would say that even other movies with Meg Ryan that later followed that were rom-coms weren't as good as Harry Met Sally, because they were trying to follow that same template, but they threw in Tom Hanks and made it cheesy. They in a few times even.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think that
Like even her own rom-coms were diminishing returns, if you understand what I'm trying to say.
yes, yeah, yes. It yes. What she had with Billy Crystal. Sorry. Yes. Yeah. What that one there worked very well. And when Meg Ryan was doing other rom-coms, didn't really capture the same thing because
No,
they weren't
because
really
it,
comedies. They're
because
more dramas. That's the thing. Like
right,
outside of that
because
one.
Tom Hanks doesn't have that sharp, quick-witted thing that Billy Crystal brought to the table. He
Right.
doesn't have it, and the writing wasn't as good on those You've Got Mails and Sleepless in Seattle and all that shit. So, oh, sorry, I apologize,
That's
script.
okay. That's all
I
right.
said a bad word on your show, and I apologize.
It's
That's
fine.
what I thought of those movies. I guess now me remembering, I don't know why I sat through You've Got Mail, but man, is that a crappy movie.
Well, yeah.
Even Sleepless in Seattle. You know what? Even in Seattle is a crappy movie. I'm sorry. They're both crappy. It's funny because I think that was their like third movie together, the You've Got Mail. They also had Joe versus the Volcano, which was also crap.
But I found it more enjoyable than You Got Mail, though.
Yes, Joe versus the Volcano, at least it was doing something different and interesting. He thought he was dying, but then he wasn't dying or something.
It was
There
all a
was something
scam. Yeah.
right. There was something going on there that at least made it half interesting. I think that actually Joe versus the Volcano, if you forced me now to watch either You've Got Mail, Sleepless in Seattle, or Joe versus the Volcano, I'm going to take Joe versus the Volcano. Not happily. I'm not going to happily take that one, but I'll take it.
So, getting back to this script here, we then jump into a montage where Nick and Sophie are now trying to figure out each other's bodies. This one, I mean, it's quick. They don't dwell on it. They throw in one joke there where Sophie's like, "Oh, I can understand, why when you guys go to the bathroom, you get it everywhere." Because it's fun to aim. Like she makes that joke. And then Nick, talks about how heels are stupid. And you get over the general quips and pros and cons kind of thing that they're going for. And then we get into the next beat, which is, hey, Fish and Skip think, hey, if you guys get really high, maybe that'll help you reset back to your own bodies. So then they all take some Molly, and we get into another montage of them trying to, figure out what's going on. There's even a gag where the two run at each other and body slam, hoping that their souls will switch back. All of this stuff is like this physical comedy aspects that I'm pretty sure, could work on screen in some regards. They might be cringy, they might be groany, depending on how they do this setup and payoff. But I appreciate the fact that they're getting these characters to explore the desperate actions as quickly and early as possible before they have to realize, oh, we're stuck like this, and we don't know if and when we're going to get out. And
I agree.
then we cut back to, okay, well, now that we're stuck like this, Sophie and Nick now have to kind of coach each other on their roles throughout the rest of the story. And so you got a little bit of a rehearsal dinner. We have this other character named Hunter, who I was confused by Hunter because his dialogue is written to the point where he's a very flamboyant and possibly homosexual person. But then we find out that, and this is coming right up towards where we have to kind of cut off for spoilers. But then we find out that he may have had a short fling with Gabby. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We can go for this part because we don't know. We're not going to spoil how it plays out. But
that was a bit. I don't want to say convoluted. I understand why they brought him into the fold because they wanted to create a crisis with bride and groom, and I think that it's not that it doesn't work, but I just feel like bringing another weirdo into the story along with like you said, with Fish and Skip, there was already too much, and Emma. I feel like there was too much going on to begin with, and once you threw this Hunter guy into the mix, it made it a little bit more convoluted than it needed to be, but it's fine.
It did, and like the way that they're setting up with Hunter is that maybe because he's friends with Sophie and Gabby, it's implied that maybe that Sophie and Hunter were an item at some point, and it's supposed to get Nick jealous. But that's really just a distraction. Yeah.
Right, it's a distraction. What I would have done is that I would have had only like, obviously instead of Fish and Skip, just like Fish or whatever you want to call it, and Emma. I just like one friend for each. Like,
yeah,
it's already bad enough because there's friends and then there's another couple, so only one other couple. Now, I would have done it that maybe Fish was the one that Gabby maybe once years ago had something with or something before she knew the other guy, and then maybe that's something you could do to just not add another character. I'm looking to downsize the characters, not throw in another one, because really that's all you needed him for, you know what I mean? I understand that there was the red herring that maybe he had something with whatever, but you know what? I'd get rid of the red herring if necessary, you know?
Well, the thing that, yeah, exactly. The way that they set it up is that, oh, this guy is here, and Sophie is surprised that he's there, even though like they're old friends from like grade school way back when. And the setup is to imply that, okay, Sophie and Hunter were a thing some years ago, so Gabby still has a friendship with him, and that's why he's at this wedding. But what we learn later is that nope, Sophie and Hunter were never a thing. Gabby and Hunter were a thing around the time when Gabby and Will immediately started dating. And so eventually Hunter and Gabby split up while Gabby was still dating Will and she's stuck with Will.
But my issue with this entire thing is that I don't think that if she had something with him prior to being this thing, she wouldn't have invited him to the wedding. I think that the only way that you bring an old fling of hers to the wedding is if it's a friend of the... if it's like a Fish or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Because then there's more at stake. That he once did something, they went out, anything. I don't know. I mean, I'd have to think about how to make that work. But I think that her inviting the guy she had a fling with prior to the wedding would be really stupid. That wouldn't be a person you invited. So maybe they got the red herring they wanted initially, but at the end the payoff is really dumb. That actually bothered me when I read the script, by the way.
Well, just to give some more context, it's not a fling right before the wedding. It was a fling before the bride and groom really got serious.
Yeah. I didn't explain it properly, but you understand what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, exactly. Because it just seems kind of odd, right? Like we didn't get the establishment of the fact that Hunter is also part of the group because he comes in so late into the story. Like it's one thing if you're like, oh, okay, they're in the box, the box at the game, all the friends are there, you have the players' wives, and like, oh, there's Hunter, there's one of, Sophie and Gabby's childhood friends, so they still hang out. Like that's where you understand the relationship, so that when you see him at the wedding, it makes sense, and then you realize, oh, okay, so even though Hunter and Gabby were a thing for a short time, it didn't work out because she fell in love with Will, but they still remained friends. But that's still kind of an awkward thing to have. But then the question you have to have which gets more convoluted.
No legitimate, even in this in a dumb rom-com setting, there's no legitimate reason to invite Hunter to that girl's wedding.
Right.
There's just no reason. He's out of left field. He's a cheat code because they wanted to have something that she has and he has at the end for their crisis.
Right.
And they thought that this was one, and they were like, well, we'll do two birds with one stone. It'll also be a red herring for like Sophie and Nick. But you know what? Doesn't work for me. It's a mistake, the Hunter one. And
well, the reason it doesn't work is that Hunter was invited. Now, had Hunter just showed up on his own, then that works because now you know what his motives are, which is he's trying to compromise the wedding.
Or even better, that he's a guy that shows up maybe on his own. Maybe Sophie and Gabby know him from their past for some reason, and he shows up on his own, but then it turns out that he's kind of been stalking her, and he learned from her Instagram that she's going to be there, that like nobody invited him, but he came because he still has a thing for her. Maybe you can get away with it. That maybe you can get away with. But just to have him there because he's a guest doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it just came out of left field. No good setup. Not a great payoff. Definitely a convoluted story beat.
Convoluted cheat code, for sure.
Really just to cause a conflict so that when it is brought up at one of the rehearsal dinners, it makes us wonder, oh my God, is the very thing that Sophie and Nick were trying to avoid going to happen? Are Will and Gabby going to break up and not do this wedding? And this is something that's played for tension far better in other situations, because before Hunter even gets there, you have Sophie's father say something, and he starts commenting about how we always knew Gabby would get married, but we never really would imagine Sophie getting married because she's such an independent woman. And then Sophie in Nick's body kind of retorts back, and that causes everybody to be like, well, why is Nick saying things like this that way? Like he's getting a little bit too personal with the father of the bride over his speech. And then you get kind of something a little bit similar with Nick and the mom, and then on top of that, you also find that both of them just do not feel like they understand the roles that they're supposed to play. There's one point where Sophie is talking to Dale and doesn't know how to talk about sports, but she ends up asking him about his feelings, and when Nick comes back to greet, to grab Sophie and then move on to the next, Dale is like sobbing, crying in his drink, and Nick's freaking is like, what the heck did you do to Dale? And she just said, do you realize that no one's ever asked him how he feels about anything? And Nick's like, why? Like, guys, we don't ask about feelings of that nature. And
right.
And it's these types of little conflicts here where both of them are kind of screwing up their own lives during this wedding because they're not able to fully navigate the roles. Regardless of how they're coaching each other, something is always kind of triggering them to sort of blurt out the wrong thing at the wrong time. And it doesn't help, like when Sophie is with Will, and Will is kind of worried about having cold feet, and Sophie is trying to threaten him, saying, like, if you don't go with this message, not only will I kill you, but Sophie will kill you too. Instead of like giving him encouragement to, you'll be fine, it's just the pre-night jitters, she does the female thing of sorts, which is, I'm going to threaten you with your life if you don't do what you're supposed to do, if you don't commit to what you said that you're going to do beforehand, because that would be how she reacts to him. But you also realize that if Sophie were talking to Gabby and Gabby had cold feet, she would play it like, no, it's just cold feet, you want this type of stuff. Like there's this double standard that we're seeing with Sophie when it comes to these things. And then with Nick, it's just more like he's got no compass, no direction of what he's supposed to be doing, because even with Emma's help, he is still trying to figure out like how to navigate being Sophie in these situations. So when they get into that fight at the dinner, and then it gets brought up that when Will and Gabby were dating, Gabby was sleeping with Hunter at the same time, and that really does make it look like the wedding is not going to happen. And that's where we're going to cut it off on spoilers here, because you have to read the rest of the script. You have to find out, well, will they be able to save the marriage? If they can save these coming up nuptials, and if so, how does Sophie and Nick figure out to get themselves back in their own bodies, if they are able to figure out if they get themselves back into their own bodies? So yes, it's a lot to talk about. This is a dense script, but it does read very fast because it is dialogue heavy. So I appreciated that. And I very much concur with your point that Hunter is this kind of cheat code, red herring, unneeded plot device brought in. But aside from that, Price, any additional thoughts you want to cover before we get to whether or not we'd greenlight or pass on the script?
I mean, I would say that I think we covered a few things that maybe could have been done better. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, even with things that I would have done differently and maybe they're not great, the script pretty much does what it aims to do. There's certain things that it does in a way that it could have done better, but I can't say that it doesn't do what it claims it wants to do.
Right. Right. Okay.
Sometimes you see a movie and it's not perfect, and you know what? A lot of times these rom-com ones are kind of, if there's ever ones that a lot of dumb things happen and you're just like kind of rolling your eyes, it is rom-coms in my opinion.
It is rom-coms. This one does have its set of dumb things. There's the Bachelorette and Bachelor Party scene
Oh,
going
I
on.
forgot about that thing with all the naked people. That was really dumb. But again, I already filed that under like stupid crap you see in a movie like this.
This is what you see in a romantic comedy, especially one of this type where it's like, oh, we got the Bachelor Party and the Bachelorette Party, and because they were both booked under the name Cartwright, like Mr. Cartwright and Mrs. Cartwright, the logistics team thought it was just a double booking, so they just followed all the parameters of it.
Which was really like half baked, that whole idea that they wouldn't know the thing. But whatever, it's fine. All of this is very far fetched. But like I said, in these type of rom coms, when dumb stuff happens that is just like out of left field, stupid, you kind of just accept it. So if this was a serious kind of drama or suspense thriller, I would tell you that this is absolutely ridiculous. But for this specific genre, I think you can get away with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they basically create a powder keg of, oh, you've got male strippers and female strippers performing for both parties in the same venue, in the same room. And the joke that they do is a very obvious one. Everybody would do it, which is why it's kind of derivative and boring, which is that the strippers start falling for each other while they're performing. And then it turns into a crazy orgy that everyone just kind of wants to distance themselves from immediately.
Right. I mean, the other way they could have gotten to this is maybe they arrive all of them to go on their separate boats, but it turns out that this one company that does these bachelor and bachelorette parties, one of the boats sank. You know what I mean? Something happened, and now they only have one boat. And then they're like, listen, all we can do, we'll give you half of the boat and half the boat, but you'll both have your event. And then it's like awkward, but nobody wants to let go of the thing, so they're like, fine, we'll do it. And that's how they all end up on the boat together. I think that would have made more sense than, oh, you're the bachelor and you're the bachelorette? Wow, like, we're so surprised. It's as if like they never saw that before in their lives. You know what I mean? That probably would have solved that issue. It's funny, I think that if whoever wrote this screenplay would have called both of us, before finalizing it, we probably would have fixed their mistakes. There aren't a million of them to fix, but I think we pretty much nailed, we were able to pinpoint the ones that didn't work.
Yeah. No, yeah, I fully agree with that. So, all right, with that being said, Price, what is your final thoughts on It's Not You, But Me? Do we greenlight this or give it a pass?
I would say that I would actually. Again, I want to throw this out here. It's not a movie that I would want to watch. If I saw a trailer for this, I wouldn't go see the movie, and it's not a movie that particularly, tickles my fancy. But if I'm a studio executive, here's what I would say. I would greenlight it on one condition. You gotta have leads in this movie that will really sell it. Like, there's that movie Anyone But You with Glenn Powell and Sydney Sweeney. That is a stupid movie with a screenplay that's more flimsy, far weaker than this one that we just went through.
Oh yeah.
And the movie made money because of the chemistry and the good vibes and them selling it, like Sweeney and Powell. That's the reason the movie did well. You need two people that people will get behind as a couple to sell this idea. And if you do, if it's like these days in Hollywood, they like to have a few land whales dating each other. But in that case, you had Glenn Powell, who the ladies like. You had Sydney Sweeney, that men like. That's a good direction to go. It has to be people that you believe could actually be a couple.
Absolutely, I'm with you on this one. I think this script, even though it's not entirely my taste, one thing I'll give it props to is that it does try to be a comedy. It does have some jokes to it. There's plenty to work with for the actors to have fun and make it a fun time for people watching it. So I would actually give this a green light because this fills that need for romantic comedies, and also it is objectively a better script than Anyone But You. It's
Exactly.
a lot more focused.
In the right hands, I think it could do well. Also, I also want to clarify. I wouldn't spend like $200 million on it.
No.
This is something that, like, you make this movie for $10 to $20 million with two very likable leads. Uh, I think that there's a way to make money here and do something that maybe people will enjoy. I wouldn't want to see, like, 100 or $200 million put into this. But those would be my stipulations.
Yeah, and
But there is a way to make this.
well, given what's in the script, I'd be hard pressed to find a way to actually pay that much for 200, 300, 100, $200 million for that type of
No, and
that script.
Hawaii gives you like tax breaks and stuff to film there. So there's incentives to film in Hawaii, so you can get something from doing that there.
Hmm.
You don't need a million people in this cast. This is
No, it's
a
it's
really
actually I think it's a cast of under 7, but even with that, it could be less if you combine Fish and Skip.
absolutely you have to
Yeah,
combine them. I maybe you combine Fish, Fish.
and
What was
Skip.
the other guy?
Fish and
Skip
Skip. Yeah.
and Hunter. Fish, Skip, and Hunter. You somehow make them one person.
Hmm.
That's really good. And if not, then Fish and Hunter.
Right.
But there's ways of downsizing, all this stuff and making it making it
Making it work better. Yeah, but
yeah.
like it doesn't require a huge overhaul compared to some of the other scripts
Doesn't
you've read.
require.
Yeah.
This could be a small production. I mean, I'm saying 10 to 20 because maybe you need some people that really like the man and woman stars that you really want them to be here so that people will come watch it.
Hmm.
But even if like you bring, let's say, two hot stars that people like, you just offer them a cut of the like a more significant cut of the back end. And just tell them, listen, this is a romantic comedy with you both in it. You'll get a salary. Here's like $1 million for each of you. But the big deal is the back end here, which you'll get a lot. You keep the costs down and you hope it'll make a good amount of money. There's something you could do here. It's workable.
Yeah, and I don't think there's much to change. So yeah, I'm with you. I'd greenlight this as well. I also advise everyone out there listening, please go give this script a read. You might actually you'll probably see what we saw with it, and ideally you'll enjoy it and think there's a potential here, as we do. If you're having trouble finding it, just reach out to me via the socials that are in the description. Or you can join my Patreon, and I can send it to you through that. It's free for 1 week at the base level, and it has all the shows that we've archived so far of Scripts on Saturdays. And with that being said, I'm going to throw it out to speaking of the Patreon, throw it out there because if you do join the Patreon, you get to vote on whether or not you'd greenlight or pass on this script. And currently, as it stands, the people that did participate, again, I can't see the number yet. I have asked Patreon to correct that for me. But so far, the Patreons, when they saw the pitch for the script, gave it a green light, 100%. So they are in the same mindset that you and I are priced in. They think there's something to the script that people would like. And this actually goes a little bit against the judges of the blacklist because, as I mentioned at the start of the show, this came in 77th, which is towards the bottom of the blacklist.
Which is surprising because there have been so many crappy things on their blacklist.
Mm-hmm.
So
For this
again,
year alone, yeah.
I also want to say it's not a movie that speaks to me. I wouldn't rush to the theater to watch it. I may not even want to watch it at all. But we're talking on a business level. I'm sitting at the head of a studio and have to make a decision. Like I said, with the right budget and the right people in the cast, I would greenlight it. Definitely, this one has more merit than some of the other ones that you and I have read together. Even the ones that I've read on this list.
Absolutely. And so moving on to our next part, if the live audience has sent in a super chat, we will read it out here on the show. Which case we have two from Ian Slater, who is a cool guy. I've actually streamed with him before, right when I started doing this whole YouTube stuff. And he says, saying hi and thank you for the X post earlier. Well, you're welcome. I saw that you made a little joke about Pizza Pizza, which is a Canadian based pizza company, and I agree wholeheartedly with your comments there.
That Little Caesars?
No, it's in Ontario. We have a place called Pizza Pizza, and they
Oh,
have actually
is
been
that,
around for a little over 40 years. And
okay.
yes, so I think they actually predate Little Caesars, but Little Caesars in the United States used Pizza Pizza as their catchshrease for their commercial
Right.
ads,
Yes.
and that caused an issue because I believe Pizza Pizza had trademarked and copyright wrote that their name internationally, and that's why I think, and only in some areas where you see a Little Caesars commercial, they don't have Pizza Pizza as their catchphrase anymore. So that's a interesting little factoid about pizza as well.
That was
Um,
like the only good thing about Little Caesars, their catchphrase.
yeah, yeah. I'm more of some other people's pizzas myself. Ian also goes on for another super chat. Thank you, sir. He says, also, can you review Dawn, Her Dad, and the Tractor? It's a Canadian-based film. Maya is a Toronto-based actress. We can't get the film in the States. That sounds very familiar. I might, yeah, I'll see what I can do about that. I barely have time to do comprehensive reviews of films these days, but I'll put that on my list here. So when time does free up, I'll check it out. I'm always apprehensive with some Canadian-based cinema because sadly Canada doesn't really have a film industry, and some of the movies that do get made are kind of difficult to get through. But you never know. Maybe this one might be good. I don't know. I will put it on my list and see what I can do for you in the near future with that, Ian.
I,
But
I
thank you so much for your support.
I once saw a Canadian independent movie where two high school or college student females fall in love.
Oh, that's it.
No,
Yeah.
I think that the actresses in the movie ended up becoming more well known afterwards.
Oh.
Like, I think that when it came out, nobody knew who they were, but over time, maybe these actresses, you actually saw them in other movies.
It's not ringing a bell for me.
I think that, I'll tell you right now, one of them was Jessica Paré or whatever her name is.
Jessica Padre. No,
Okay, I'm going
that's
to
not
tell you
ringing
right
a
now.
bell. Yeah. No, it's
Uh,
there's not many. Yeah, Jessica Padre. No. Yeah, I know Kathleen Isabella is a Canadian actress. She's been in some romantic films and some horror films.
I'll tell
She's
you
famous
right
for
now.
Ginger Snaps.
Okay, it was called Lost and Delirious,
Lost and
and
Delirious.
and it had Piper Perabo, Jessica Paré, and Misha Barton, and all of them ended up like you saw them in other things.
Well, I mean, Misha Barton, yeah, definitely. I
Jessica
can't.
Paré ended up being on Mad Men. I don't know if she did anything afterwards, but she played Don Draper's wife, like the
Yeah,
second wife.
yeah, yeah.
And Piper Perabo, that she seems familiar also. She was in a bunch of stuff later also.
Uh, I think she was in The Prestige.
Yeah, she was in The Prestige. She
Yeah, she
was.
looks
So
familiar. Yeah, she looks like one of them. Yeah.
so yeah, when I was studying film back in the day a long time ago, they showed that movie, and at the time I'd never seen any of those actresses anywhere, and it was like, look, we're showing you this indie movie, and I think it's Canadian. It's a Canadian movie, I think that like there's these young ladies that are kind of into each other. At the time, I guess that was like a groundbreaking thing to do.
Well, if it's the turn of the century, yes, that would have been groundbreaking. That would have tried to get it on the radar for people to talk about. Because just being a movie from Canada means nothing. But if it's a movie about lesbians from Canada, that that's
It was a
something.
2001 Canadian film directed by Leah Poole. I don't know who that is. And yeah, I'm telling you, it probably won a bunch of those kind of like, those awards that don't, that those vague awards like the golden,
The
the
Golden
golden
Leaf or something
seagull.
like that, or
Yeah,
yeah,
the golden seagull or whatever it is. And you're like, what? So it probably won like 7 golden seagulls or something. You know what I'm talking
maybe.
about.
Yeah, gosh, that's a little before my time, and also, yeah, I was, some would call me a bad Canadian for not paying too much attention to like Canadian cinema around the turn of the century, but frankly, I like the stuff that was more cleverly done from decades earlier than I do current
I
day.
don't claim to
I'm more of
even
a
know.
Norm
I don't
Jewison
even.
fan purist than I am
Of course, of course.
today's.
I don't claim to even know Canadian cinema. It's just that like I remember that was a very big deal. Like that movie was like a Canadian indie movie,
Mhm.
and I guess I was forced to watch this thing, and I don't know.
All right. Well, man, with that being said, I want to thank you, Price, for joining me this weekend with Scripts on Saturdays reviewing It's Not You, It's Me. If you could please tell everyone out there listening where they can find you and what sort of stuff you like to partake on the interwebs here.
Well, there's two places you could find me. One is Price of Reason. That's my main YouTube channel, and that's where there's usually movie reviews or kind of things that are it's more shorter form videos that are just to the point. And then you have Price of Reason Live, which I do more kind of live streams. That's where we do our reviews for Quantum Leap. Those are kind of lengthier videos, more experimental content, and just live streams. So either or, both of those are good to subscribe to. But Price of Reason and Price of Reason Live, that's what I recommend people do. And yeah, check those out.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that. Thank you again, everyone out there. Thanks to Ian Slater for those generous super chats. Not required, but always grateful for them. Until next week, guys, have a wonderful weekend. And never forget, when it comes to great story, it all starts with the script.